Good morning, consciousness rising, mind your head here with
Hello.
Tasha.
Why are we like this today?
Yes, we're going to sing about the Tartarians.
Oh God, it's hard enough to talk about it.
That's true. Very complicated. Anyway, welcome if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Devon Mackenzie Friends, or if you're watching on Truth Pills.
Hello.
Hello. So, Tasha, you've got all this very in-depth, complicated Tartarian information.
And I've tried to really scale it down to try and make it not too overwhelming. And I think it's worth sort of pointing out at the very beginning. So if you start to research Tartarian stuff, there's a lot of information out there which obviously says it's a psyop, it's a conspiracy theory, it's up there with the sort of other things like flat Earth and all the other things they put in there. It's quite hard to find any information in there. So what I will say is what I am going to read out and talk about isn't necessarily 100% my beliefs. Some of it I take on, some of it I don't. How do we know it's a story?
How do we know? But these days, when they say something is a psyop, I always think, it's going to be true then,
it's got to have something in it. And also, I'll start talking about the Tartarians a bit as people, but actually when we get into the architecture and stuff like that, you'll see that that is evidential.
Yeah.
Rather than, but obviously we can't, it's very hard to...
Well, if let's say, for example, I'm going to say I believe that the Tartarians were a real thing, right? The only thing that's left is the architecture, because they've erased what they can from so that we don't know the truth about our history, and we're beginning to realise a lot of our history is actually completely fabricated and not the truth.
And also, if things that even are true, the timeline's been squashed right now. I think, or stretched out, which way around? Stretched out, sorry. It's been stretched out. I think it's been stretched out, so, 1060, all of that, and I think they put the history, I think lots of stuff that happened a lot closer together.
And they've drawn it out so that they can fill in the chunk that was the Tartarians.
And also, if you think about it, prior to the Dark Ages, there's loads of information. Post-Dark Ages. So what is the Dark Ages?
I've always wondered about the Dark Ages.
Why is there no information? It's possibly because it's hidden.
Yeah.
And it's about this.
I mean, if we've got information with cave paintings and things like that, why is there a big chunk of history where we've just got
there's nothing? Yeah. And we're all going and dragging our feet around, and
some of us are still doing that now, aren't they?
So what I thought I'd start with is I put it into some words to try and just put a couple of paragraphs, more like a page, of just explaining the Tartarians without any too much stuff. So I'm going to literally read off this.
Go for it.
So, they're a past civilization which dominated most of the world from Russia, Europe, North and South America, New Zealand, Africa and India. Their existence and culture and technology have been wiped out from all of our history books. These books were lightly destroyed in the 19th and 20th century, along with the vast amount of their architecture. It is believed that Tartarians were destroyed by the same advanced technology that is used to control our weather today. Some believe that it was flooded, firebombed, or that they were victims of direct energy weapons.
Wow.
It is said that many of their bones are buried under the cities that we live in today. There are numerous documents suggesting that giants lived among them. The Old World Order was considered a peaceful, benevolent society where geometrical patterns and designs, pipe organs, music, and Catalan bells were used to heal and to achieve a higher consciousness. All of the Old World architecture and technology that we know now was inherited from the Tartarians, and what remains has been repurposed and recreated to portray a version of history that has led us to believe that we are, as humans, always at our peak in intelligence and technological advancement. As per our controllers, that's what they've orchestrated for us to sort of live in this matrix, if you like. So Tartarian architecture has been falsely named as Islamic, colonial, neoclassical, medieval, Renaissance, Victorian, to name a few. These buildings are all the same, all from the same era.
Same era.
Yeah.
And when do we think that era actually really was?
This is where it gets a bit tricky. So, I think one thing to point out is the reset they think happened in the 1800s and the 1900s. And there's talk of it being a big mud flood. There was talking about the direct weapons and stuff like that. So that's not very long ago, is it, if we think about it? And I think what a lot of people are saying is that you get like on Victorian buildings in like 1889 or 1904 and stuff like that. They're saying that quite possibly the one was added, so we need to take 1,000 years off.
Okay.
Or the dates were put up when they were reconstructed and repurposed. So then we come to the thing which we've talked about before, is why is there no memory of this?
Yeah.
Because we're not talking very long ago, are we?
No.
100, 200 years
200
ago.
years ago.
So think about it now. It's not to the same level, obviously, but this whole coronavirus thing. Think how quickly people believed that you can pass on an infection when you're asymptomatic. Everyone believes that now. How quickly did that happen? Whereas throughout the past, that's never been a thing.
No, if you haven't got symptoms, you can't pass it on.
And
because you're well.
So now that could, if we carry on the direction that we're going in, will be passed down, and that will be concrete belief and evidence.
And when we were talking about it, you also said it only takes one generation to change history.
So what it is, it's 3 generations to totally change history, but they turn it into 1 generation by instilling fear or war or just disaster, basically. So if you think about this timing here, since that timing, you had like the Spanish flu, you had
both of the
world wars, and then also don't forget there's all those pictures at the end of the 1800s where all the cities were empty. And that was part of this reset. So if you kill the majority of adults and you get left with loads of orphans, which history says there was that period of time had lots and lots of orphans, then you bring up these orphans, there is no history.
Yeah.
So when these young people become young men and women, and they're just told to work on these buildings to refurbish them, to do whatever needs to be done to them,
they're going to believe whatever's
been told. So that's how simply you can change it. So you can change it by resetting and getting rid of most people over the age of 50 or 40, which you can do with an epidemic, pandemic, wars, floods, whatever. Great fires. I mean, all the great fires of London, I'm pretty sure they were all orchestrated as well. It's all about destroying evidence, basically.
Yeah. And can I just throw in a really random question here?
Absolutely. I might get to answer it.
So, well, I'm just thinking about dinosaurs, right? So if we find a dinosaur bone, I'm now thinking, was it a Tartarian giant's leg bone or something? And they've made up the dinosaur thing as
Have
a
they
cover
actually found any
for big
dinosaur
bones?
bones?
I don't know. It's just one of my random little weird thoughts that go on in my
Think about what these
mind.
museums are like. No one's allowed to touch them or do anything, are they? They're all fenced off, the dinosaur museums and natural history. Bones are really strong structure. It doesn't need protecting in the way that they make out it does. It's probably because it's bloody made of silicone or plaster of Paris or something.
So they're just not real bones.
Just probably not even real bones.
But I mean, because you said that the Tartarians lived with giants. I thought they were giants.
I think there's giants among them. I do talk a little bit about it further on, but I think, it was more
so they
giants
weren't all
among
giants.
them. No, I don't think they were all giants.
But you know, when you look at the vastness of the architecture, it makes
big doorways,
sense. Yeah,
huge big doorways, and they obviously did a lot of the building. The taller people.
Yeah, and I have to throw in that I have always, even as a child, questioned the beautiful. I've thought, well, how? If we're supposed to be at the peak of our development now,
all we've done is go backwards.
Yeah, I don't think we could make those beautiful buildings now.
No, of course we couldn't. No.
They're works of art.
They are, absolute.
So that's always been a red flag for me.
So I tried to look and find out when the Tartarians started, if you like, when this civilization started. I couldn't find anything specific. However, according to the lovely Wikipedia, the first power stations were established in Cairo in Egypt in 876. So that's obviously a sign of that type of technology being used as far back as that time. Yeah. And if you can look at maps, I've seen a map in 1840 and one in 1846 where the Tartaria is quite clearly on it. It's spelled without the first R, so it's T-A-T.
Tartarian.
Yeah. And when you look at some of the maps with it in, they just make it look like a uncivilized, vast, foresty type thing. So you've got Mongolia, Siberia, and then Russia. It's all that sort of area. And think about the architecture that's left in all that area now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all very beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
Really, really stunning. So I think that they were started there, if you like, and then they ended up
sort of expanding from that area.
From that area. And I don't think to say that was the only one civilization. I don't think is the case. There'd have been obviously other civilizations among them as well, but I think they all live very peacefully together. And it's believed that they had a really good relationship with Source or the Holy Spirit, which actually relates to the ether. So although their buildings weren't built for religious purpose, they were still considered holy sites because of their ether connection and the extraction from the ether. So the beauty of the architecture reflects this in their churches, because they were used as a place to heal. They were healing centres, and they healed animals there, all sorts of things through there, and the pipe organs had a big part in that, and the science dynamics.
So they weren't maybe known as churches, but as perhaps healing centres.
They were healing centres, and that's perhaps why people feel a sense of peace when they go to churches, and they feel...
Because that energy is still...
Energy. Yeah.
There are going to be remnants of that energy still in there.
Yeah, so they use the pipes and the electromagnetic energy to basically heal animals and people.
So that's sound healing, frequency healing
Yeah.
for the animals.
And they were related as a race or a civilization, whatever you want to call them, through thoughts and intention, design, and an advanced consciousness. And it was all about love and sort of being very, very peaceful. And they believed that you put more back in than what you took out, was their philosophy. So they had a flag, and it had a picture of a griffin on it, and a griffin is part eagle, part human, part lion, and part androgynous bull.
Oh, that's freaked me out.
Yeah, part androgynous bull as well.
No, the griffin bit.
Is it?
Yeah.
You don't like that?
What?
You don't like griffin?
No, I had a thing with a griffin.
Okay.
In my weirdness. Anyway, that's
Okay,
by
we'll
the
talk
way.
about that in a minute.
Yeah.
So, in effect, it had no colonies. Some people say, it was a one-world civilization without frontiers and common understanding, ruled by qualified princes. They elected local council of wise men, but it was councilled by the women.
Oh, so the women were.
So even though they weren't the heads, they were the brains.
So the women were kind of underneath.
Doing the work.
Doing the work.
Yeah, basically.
But a bit like now, then, really.
Very similar to now. So then the other interesting fact is, obviously, is their size. So they were believed to be between 6 foot and 12 foot, the average being 10 foot. So some would consider these people giants, but obviously if you were the 6 foot height, you'd be just like a tall person now. So not all of them were giants when we say about giants.
Yeah, so they were basically consciously higher evolved than we are now.
Possibly because there was more O2 in the air.
Ah, yes. So we think that the oxygen levels were higher, and that's why they were bigger.
Yeah.
Because we know that there were bigger trees and other things in nature that were bigger.
Yeah, everything was bigger because the O2 content was higher.
Yeah.
Which produces, bigger things.
But in terms of their consciousness, they were obviously more advanced than we
Oh,
are.
gosh, yeah. Very, very much
because they were
so.
healing, and also they had this architecture that was basically drawing energy from the ether.
I'll talk all about that in a minute.
Yeah.
I really
so they
looked into
had
the
scientific knowledge that we don't have.
And it's the scientific side of this that I'll talk about that makes you understand it better.
Yeah.
And and the other interesting thing about the Tartarians, they were believed to have been Breathians. How do you pronounce it?
I don't know.
So breath.
I call
Breatharian.
I call it pranayamic.
Yeah. So basically.
Living.
Basically, that they don't rely on digesting and the burning of calories. So they don't rely on eating food to consume their energy. Instead, they receive their energy straight from the ether, much how plants do for energy now. So they'd have the roots for the water, and then they get the energy from the sun.
Yeah, I mean, we hear about these very highly evolved monks that just live off prana. They don't eat. And also, we've discussed before, when we can't eat, we go through phases where we can't eat.
Just not hungry. I'm not a hungry person anyway.
Yeah, and I haven't been. What I've been eating's been going down over the years. And then I was saying, well, if we're really highly evolved, we can live off light and air. You don't need food.
See, I've never felt hunger. I eat because of not even an addiction, boredom. I don't feel hungry. I've always said it to you before, haven't I? I don't feel hunger ever until I put something in my mouth, and then it triggers something. But I wouldn't ever eat if we're told to eat. Do you know what I mean? I'm just very weird with food. I love it and I eat it, but I don't understand hunger.
And we know that there was no sewage systems.
Yes.
So if they didn't poop.
Yeah, so basically when they looked at some of the old thing, there wasn't any sewage things, and apparently bathrooms didn't have toilets either, so places to wash didn't have toilets. And then the other thing to think about is their land, so their castles and all their stately homes. Yes, they had gardens, they're all beautiful patterns, but they didn't have farmland. They weren't growing food.
Yeah. So it sounds like they didn't need to eat.
So if you think you had like a big castle, you'd expect massive farming ground to be around it. So I doubt they So animals would have lived harmoniously with them as well, because they wouldn't have been a source of food, perhaps. So there wasn't any evidence of any proper... I think they used to grow herbs for healing.
Yeah. But you lower the oxygen level and then people have got to eat.
Yeah.
And also, I've been saying to you, I think the food thing is a psyop as well, because it's just, when you don't watch TV and then you do watch it, you just see loads of cookery programs, loads of adverts, so it's like, eat.
And also, who says, like, breakfast,
lunch and dinner?
It should be intuitive eating.
Yeah.
You should eat when
Eat
you're
when you
hungry,
want to.
and what you want to eat. Not like, if you need something sweet in the morning, you should be able to eat that. And if you want something, do you know what I mean? It shouldn't be... You shouldn't have this sort of... It's very restricted, isn't it, eating? Yeah. It's not very natural. Yeah, no, we're not going with our instinct on when we eat. No. We're being told. And the other thing is, fasting is so good for us. Intermittent fasting, you can reset your insulin levels, you can cure your diabetes. So there's a lot to be said for not eating. Absolutely. And so obviously the Tartarians' digestive system is very different to ours. Yeah. I presume, and that's evolved, like you say, is it through the O2, or just the fact that our consciousness has just been dumbed down so much that we've just become... Yeah, I think it's more that. Kind of like what we've become, sort of thing. Right, so that, I thought I'd leave that bit there at the Tartarians, but quite interesting. Very interesting. So, if we now look into the actual energy and their buildings. So all cities and towns depended on electromagnetic energy. The energy was collected from the ionosphere, which is 30 miles above the stratosphere, which is the bit that we're in now. And then within the ionosphere, you've got the thermosphere and the mesosphere. So it's basically an electrical atmosphere which is ionised by the sun's electromagnetism, resulting in coloured plasma. That's why the sky's blue. Textbooks will state that the ionosphere is just an atmospheric layer, but in reality, it's ethereal. I can never say that word, but basically the ether. Ethereal. Ethereal. That's the word. So basically, so it's ethereal, basically. So ether is the element that produces electromagnetism. It's considered the mysterious fifth element. So there's 5 elements, not 4. And it's a driving force behind absolutely everything. So the other 4 elements, air, water, earth and fire, only exist because of the expressions of the vibration of the ether. So it's the most important element, actually. So cymatics is a really good example of this. So all matter, is that word again? I can't say it. Ethereal. All matter is ethereal. Why can't I say that? Don't know. I'm such a weirdo. Is ethereal, I can say it. And it's determined by frequency and vibration. So cymatics is the architecture of sound, putting it in a nice simple way. Okay. And the ether bridges the electromagnetic frequency and the vibrational energy. Okay, so basically, in a nutshell, we live on a planet where the layers of our atmosphere contain electromagnetic energy, 30 miles up,
which we can draw down and use as free energy.
Yes. So how do we do this? So this is where the buildings come into it, and how they harness the electromagnetism, basically. So the Antiquitech, which you see on top of churches, and you don't so much anymore because they've repurposed it all, but it would have been on top of stately homes, castles, government buildings, post offices, all these very ornate, pretty buildings that we see around us. And they were quite often crosses, half crescents, or like spiked looking sort of antennas. If you look at the cathedrals, they've got all of those spiky bits. The metal things, that spikes that go up. Yeah, so you quite often see like a dome. But they look ornamental, but they're not. That's how it's extracted from the ether. So they'd be made out of either copper or gold. Oh, okay. So you see like with a mosque, you'll see the thing, and then you'll see the half crescent with the star. So all of that isn't religious at all. It was repurposed to look like that. So basically, these symbols are actually antennas that extract the energy from the ether. Yeah. And then these symbols were repurposed and described as religious adornments, so that we accepted as a cover. Yeah. So that we accepted that's what they were. So these are and were obviously found on, like I said, churches, cathedrals, town halls, libraries, post offices, schools, universities, courthouses, abbeys, council buildings, mosques, etc. Now think about all of those places, right? Think about why they housed those particular places in there. Was it so that they could still use the free energy? Because they're all government-based buildings. Oh, so do you think they're still... Maybe not so much today, but I reckon in the transition period... They were maybe in the 1800s or whatever, they were still drawing the free energy, but using us mere peasants to start using the petroleum form of energy.
Yeah.
Maybe they do still today. I have heard that military bases are built on ley lines and that they have free energy.
I heard they had free energy, but I didn't know where it was
So
coming from.
is it possible that that's what they're doing? Are they these buildings? Because they're all owned by the state, aren't they?
Yeah.
All of those sort of buildings.
Yeah.
So then they're sort of saying that multiple religions were created to hide the true meaning of God and the antiquitech on the old world power station buildings. And I said already that they're made of gold or copper, so
Which
they
is
conduct
highly
electricity.
conductive, yeah.
So once the energy hit these antennas, it would then travel to the domed cavities, which you see in cathedrals, and that they're beautiful, aren't they?
And Russia, loads of those in Russia, aren't there?
Now they would have always been copper or gold, and obviously they've changed them. I think some of them are even tiled now, aren't they? They've repurposed them to not look as beautiful, but yeah, so they would have initially been like that. And they are basically called resonators. And if you look at the underside of these structures, so if you were inside the cathedral and you look on the underside, they're heavily adorned, aren't they, with like beautiful symmetric patterns, quite often flowers. They look like flowers or roses, and they're basically like indented into the stone on the inside, and they're basically perfect symmetry. And this symmetry produces oscillation, which is a vibration of energetic particles, which causes the ions to vibrate perfectly.
So in other words, so the energy is drawn down through the thingy, hits the dome. Inside the dome, you've got all these beautiful patterns that are perfectly symmetric, which then
oscillates.
So it's building it up.
Yeah.
So you're drawing down the power, and then you're kind of I get you. I'm with you.
Oh, and then you have a smaller type of capacity resonator, which are repurposed today as stained glass windows in churches and cathedrals, or as rose windows in things like town halls, post offices. You know, you get like they're round like that, and they've got a bit in the middle, and they've got like the perfect pretty.
Yeah, looks like a flower.
Yeah, so basically they're very, you see them in all the ornate old world structures, don't you? These sort of very pretty stained glass windows, but of course they never had glass in.
Okay, so it was open.
They were open.
Shape. So it was the shape.
It was the shape, yeah. So basically, the repurposing, they put the stained glass windows in to
make it look like, this is all just decorative.
This is all to do with the church or whatever.
Yeah.
So these were basically actually cavity magnetrons, which are high-powered vacuum tubes generating microwaves, same as our microwaves that we've got today. And it uses the interaction of the stream of the ions with the magnetic field operating through the hollowed symmetrical vacuum. So if the symmetry is broken or the vacuum is distracted in any way, they cannot function at all. So
if I knocked out a bit of one of the flowers,
wouldn't work.
That bit just wouldn't work.
Which is why they're so perfectly made. I mean, how maybe they were made with lasers, I don't know.
Yeah, they are absolutely perfect.
They're just perfect, aren't they?
Yeah.
So they can't function. So then within these cavity magnetrons, we have the cathodes. We had the cathodes, which is obviously, think of the word cathedral. Cathode, cathedral. So our controllers removed most of these cathodes. But however, if you look at the rose windows, some of them have still got like a metal ring in the very centre bit, which is where the cathode would have been.
What's a cathode? Can you just explain?
So a cathode is it's a piece of metal which electrons can move, and it's basically, try and put it into words. So it delivers the negative electron into the energy field.
The negative and the positive, don't you?
Yeah, the anode would be the positive.
Okay.
And the cathode is the negative.
Okay, I'm with you.
And so basically, it would have been like, so you have the rose like that, and then it would have been, you can sometimes see the metal thing in those windows.
Yeah.
They've pretty much been removed, and that would be attached there. But then for all of this whole thing to work, it needs to work in unison with a central engine or a reactor. So there are evidences of these being repurposed everywhere in churches and cathedrals. They're always hexagonal. Have a think what that might be in the cathedrals and churches. It's where they baptise.
Yeah, I was going to say the font.
Yeah.
Where they put the babies.
So they call them, what they call it, baptistries or something? Baptistries?
I don't know.
But yeah, basically those things. And then also bandstands and random hexagonal structures in gardens, with just a fountain in it.
Yeah.
Fountains are another classic one. So these engines didn't always need to be inside the actual
so it could be outside.
things. They could have been outside, especially if they were a big power station. You'd have these bits on the outside. Yeah, so they were always hexagonal, and that was basically the engine of everything. So
and
that,
hex is that's 6, isn't it? 6-sided.
yeah, so it's always had 6-sided. So that explains how the ether comes down, and then
it's harvested, if you like, and then you've got the negative and the positive to get the charge, and then you've got your free.
Then you've got your free energy.
Free energy.
So the other thing pointing out is arches and columns. So columns, so you get like colosseums, and you just get beautiful columns. If you're going up to like the White House in America, it's got those columns, isn't it?
Yeah.
So basically, the columns have iron rods going all the way through them.
Middle, yeah.
And
that's the conductor.
They're the conductor, and they're always made of limestone, dolomite, and granite. And they're mixed with crystal silicon, which is basically quartz, and that has strong electrical power. And then what it does is it has the I think it's called a toroid coil,
all the way around,
which is why it's shaped like that. So that creates that type of energy like that. Yeah. So basically, that's a very strong thing. And then we've got to think about towers and is it obelisks? What they're called? Obelisks. So of course we think of them as being dark, but they're not. They were just repurposed and taken.
Oh, so are they drawing down
Absolutely
from the ether as well?
Basically, they are capacitors, so they're batteries.
Yeah.
So they store the energy.
They're holding the energy.
Yeah, so they've obviously been moved around and plonked and repurposed and
we got one quite
things.
near in Wellington, haven't we? You know, when you're driving along the M5, you can see it on the hill. I always look at it.
And people think, that's really satanic or that's really dark, but of course it's not. It's
or
only
just
because
that
they've taken over it.
Yeah.
They've taken it over.
And there's one outside. There's one along the embankment in London as well.
Yeah, there's outside. There's one in Washington. There's one outside the Vatican. But that's because they probably. That's really annoying.
Oh,
it's all right.
Good heavens!
Oh, good heavens!
Tasha's got a bite.
Oh dear. So let me quickly do the others. So towers. So they're basically batteries. Then you've got urns as well on the sides. They're batteries as well. And then red bricks. So lots of Tartarian buildings are red bricks.
That red brick, yeah.
So that's iron oxide. And of course, they're batteries as well. Think of night storage heaters, how we use those. So you get the energy and then you hold it and then you decide when to let it out. So
interesting as well that the stones have got crystals in or metal in, which are
all part of it. And I don't know not put that on there. I'll use it for my brain. Oh, arches, viaducts and bridges. So think of the Arc de Triomphe as a classic one. So they're basically powerful electromagnets. Think of the horseshoe magnet.
Yeah.
That's what they are.
Yeah.
So you've got the north, which is the negative, and the south, which is the positive.
Yeah.
So that all of those. So when you see viaducts, and they've got tons of them. They're all going on top.
It's about energy.
It's a great big magnet.
Yeah.
Huge, great big magnet, basically. Yeah. And it was very likely that the Arc de Triomphe and all of these arches would have had water running underneath them. And think of like the canal straits. They've always got those bridgey, I don't know what to call them, but column things over them. If you go to the Suez Canal, you have to go through.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing to point out is water was always present in or around these buildings. So it could have been to keep things cool, to stop things overheating. Or the other theory is that the water was stored underneath these structures and it was a type of battery. The water was ionised and then stored underneath the bricks, in the bricks.
Because a lot of the sort of what we call stately homes now, the gardens are all laid out, but they would have all been waterways
all
in
water,
there.
yeah.
All so water was a massive part of it. We're not sure exactly how or in why it was, but water's involved as well.
Water's definitely involved, yeah. And all the cities were designed basically as giant interconnected power grids, just like a motherboard.
So there's actually pictures, isn't there, Tash, of places lit up.
Yes, and that was after the Great Reset as well. So I always wondered how
they were supposed to have electricity.
Yes, so I always wondered how they justified that.
A crossover where they still had this free energy.
They definitely did, and it was definitely still used. And I wonder if it was like a 2-tier society
for a while.
Oh no, they definitely still use it, and they probably are still using it to this day. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
In certain things, because why did they keep some buildings? Why were all those buildings all repurposed as government-based public places? You know, you've got to look at the intention there.
Yeah.
So, but everything is repurposed. I think that's the most thing to remember, from stained glass windows to churches to the organs to
so they've baptised people in to sort of cover what it was really all about.
To cover what it's all about, and they've used religion as a big part of that tool. Yeah.
And so, if we're going with the Tartarians were real and existed, they had to take the Tartarian system down in order to enslave us in
Yes.
terms of energy.
And let's not forget, this isn't like this would have been planned again, like this coronavirus thing's planned. It's been planned for years and years and years. So it would have been a big project, and it would have been carefully thought about. And that's why they have all the fear and all these disasters shortly afterwards. It's to cover it up and to kill off the older generation who can tell the stories.
Yeah, to pass it down. And you actually, when you were doing the research, when we talked in the week, over the last couple of weeks, you got really cross one day because you were just like, oh my God, if only it had been left like that. What a beautiful world they lived in.
Exactly.
Beautiful architecture.
And you can feel it, can't you, when you just look at these buildings? They're so
well, and
stunning.
when you walk inside these buildings, you know, when you do go, you can feel the energy.
They're beautiful.
And I've always thought, we didn't build this shit.
No,
We can, you know, we have difficulty, you know. Well,
look at the state of architecture nowadays. It's
it's disgusting and it's ugly.
So ugly. I'd love to have gone back to those times, definitely.
And it was a peaceful people that probably didn't even need
And we didn't have to
eat.
have a poo.
Didn't have to have a poo.
I wonder if they weed. Might have weed.
Yeah, I expect they had to have water. Have a little pee-pee.
Plants don't wee, though.
No, they don't actually, do they?
No. Interesting.
I think the when they're, you know, it what's the word, evaporates.
Yes,
rather
probably
than
evaporation.
So maybe they didn't even wee; they just evaporated their
I
water.
think as well they did eat and consume stuff, but it wasn't for
like we do.
For life. It was for enjoyment. So I think they probably grew nice berries and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? I think they did, you know.
Eat for maybe perhaps just a pleasure rather
yes,
than a need.
Yeah, rather than the fact that it's needed for survival. Yeah.
Although I don't think we need to eat as much as we
definitely not with grotesque. Yeah. I'm sorry, but I'm like with gluttony.
Just recently, I've just realised the whole food thing is a psyop. I just
gross,
feel like it's a psyop to get people unhealthy and
it
fat,
is exactly
and
what it's
don't
about.
need to eat as much as we eat.
No, it's gross.
And intermittent fasting is the way to stay healthy and all of that, and it's never passed on to us. I mean, there's lots and lots more about the Tartarians, but we're gonna do a part 2, aren't we?
If they want it, they might.
If you want it,
they might
if
not
you want it, say it.
But hopefully that's explained a little bit. And then what you can do is we'll put some links about some bits you can watch. There's a guy called John Levi who's quite interesting. If you want to know more about the mud floods and what happened, that was part of the reset. And then there's I can never say his name. Urarian.
I can't say his name either. Can't help you there.
Uaran. Who's done everything from the empty cities to the orphans and all of that sort of stuff. So
he's got a great channel on
he's on
Telegram.
I'd say just to watch that really.
Yeah,
that gives a good.
But you know what it tells us is that there have been races on this planet which have been wiped out. And it tells us that we've been reset a number of times.
Loads of times. I would imagine all of it from the plague to way back, they're all resets and possibly lies as well as to what they were resetting. We weren't living in great poverty in those times at all. They were just trying to get rid of this culture. Call it Tartarian, call it whatever you want to call it. It's been about getting rid of that all along, and they've been doing it for a very, very, very long time. Yeah.
Sneaky.
So, hope that was interesting anyway.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. And if you want a part 2, there is a lot more about the Tartarians as a race and as a group.
A bit more history and where they came from. And
a bit more history.
A bit about how America is actually Tartarian and lots of... and Arabic. They were basically Arabic from the Moors and stuff like that. But yeah, we'll hold fire.
We'll hold fire on that. If you want it, let us know. So that said, it's New Year's Eve today, isn't it? So wishing you all a happy New Year.
Have a good one.
And we shall see you in 2022, won't we, Tash?
We will.
Yeah. All right,
guys. See you later, guys. Bye.
Bye.